Nietzsche had already said this shot about women, and nobody cared. It was supposed to be an important conversation, the kind that could change the course of a relationship. But it got lost amidst shallow laughter and comments about the traffic, price of coffee, and how things are these days. What needed to be said was left hanging in the air like an unsent letter, and no one noted. There is a silence that spans centuries, and yet it remains invisible to those who do not want to listen. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Today we waste time pretending that certain truths don't exist, because reality, when it knocks on the door, doesn't ask for permission. It enters. And when it enters, it changes everything. Marcus Aurelius would remind us that a sincere look at reality is like the cold wind that comes through an open window, uncomfortable at first, but necessary to freshen the air. The truth is a forgotten mirror in the corner of a room. You know it's there. You know that a cloth is all it takes to wipe away the dust, but you prefer not to clean it because you suspect the reflection will not please you. Nietzsche didn't have that choice. He looked, he saw, and he spoke. And that's why he was so unsettling, because there is nothing more uncomfortable than someone who points out what you spend your life trying to ignore. Think of the dust accumulated on the glass. It doesn't disappear on its own. On the contrary, every day without facing what is there is a day the layer gets thicker, harder to remove. We are experts at cultivating this invisible accumulation. We call it routine, letting it go, avoiding trouble. But it's just fear. Fear of seeing what has always been in front of us. Discomfort is like an unexpected visitor. You know he's at the door, but you stand still, hoping he'll go away. And he never does. Nietzsche already knew this. He knew that pointing out the obvious is more dangerous than revealing a secret, because the obvious is the secret that everyone has agreed to hide. Life in these moments seems like a rehearsed play where everyone knows their line except you. But perhaps that is precisely where freedom begins, the moment you stop repeating the script and decide to improvise, even if it shatters the entire play. And that is why the silence is not just historical, it is intimate. It is not only in books or in phrases that have crossed time, but in interrupted conversations, averted gazes, and truths that got stuck in the throat. The courage to face what we avoid is like the first breath that ignites a fire on a cold night. It doesn't illuminate everything at once, but it is no longer possible to pretend that the darkness is total. When the truth hurts more than the comfortable lie, there is a type of pain that doesn't scream, doesn't bleed, doesn't leave a visible mark. It is the pain of knowing something and pretending you don't, of realizing that the person in front of you is not who you imagine, but preferring to sustain the image you invented, because tearing it down would require rebuilding the entire scenery of your life. It's like walking down a brightly lit corridor and choosing to close your eyes just so you don't see the dust accumulated on the wall. The body moves forward, but the conscience remains stuck back there in the instant the truth was revealed. The human being is a master at creating stories that comfort, even if they are fragile. Relationships, friendships, silent agreements, all can turn into sandcastles. With each new wave, they give way a little more. But instead of facing the fact that the foundation is unstable, we prefer to tell ourselves that it will get better, that it's just a phase. And so we go on repeating phrases that sound like prayers but are merely barriers against the inevitable. Marcus Aurelius said that the truth does not depend on our acceptance to exist. It simply is. Nietzsche understood this game well. He knew that few can bear the harsh light that exposes the crack. It is easier to live in the half-light, where shapes are vague, and the mind can mold them as it pleases. But the half-light comes at a price. In order to not see what is before us, we also end up not seeing what could save us. And it is at this point that the comfortable lie becomes an elegant prison with doors always open, but which no one dares to cross. The truth is uncomfortable because it demands action. Once we see it, there is no way to unsee it. It demands choices. It demands sacrifice. It demands that we stop blaming circumstances and face our own silent pact. It is the moment we realize that all the time invested in avoiding the pain only delayed us in facing it. Seneca reminded us that postponing what needs to be done is the same as choosing long suffering over a brief one. Deep down, we know that the comfortable lie is like a house built on quicksand. It may seem firm on a calm day, but one unexpected movement is enough for everything to sink. And when it sinks, it is not just the house that is lost. It is the illusion that it was our safe shelter. That's when we discover that the truth, however harsh, was always the only ground we could truly stand on. The silent mistake of thinking understanding is submission. There is a delicate boundary between understanding and surrendering to another's carelessness. It's like offering shelter to someone on a stormy night and, without realizing it, allowing that person to turn your home into a place where you no longer have space. Many call this patience, others love. But sometimes it's just disguised fear. Fear of losing, fear of displeasing, fear of facing the emptiness that would come if the door were closed. Seneca said that dignity is not a luxury, it is a necessity. And dignity begins at the point where we recognize that our worth does not depend on how much we endure, but on how much we can remain whole while we live. It is possible to extend a hand without offering one's own body as a sacrifice. It is possible to listen to the other without accepting being hurt in the same place repeatedly. But for this, one must accept that love is not an excuse for the absence of change. There are relationships that feed on the understanding of others like a river that never stops drinking from its bank. Little by little, the soil disappears and the course of the water changes. What was once a safe landscape becomes unstable ground. This erosion is almost invisible until the moment we look around and no longer recognize the bank where we stood. Marcus Aurelius would remind us that life is a constant flow, but it is our choice where to plant our feet. Nietzsche would understand this irony. The strength we imagine having by enduring can be the very thing that prevents us from leaving. We become trapped in a cycle that wears us down, believing that persistence is a virtue when in fact it has become a shackle. It is a silent mistake because it is easy to justify. I'm giving another chance. Everyone has flaws. It will get better. But while we say this, reality remains motionless and repetition becomes law. Deep down, understanding that ignores limits is not kindness. It is self-abandonment. And when we abandon ourselves, any gesture from the other seems like a favor. Perhaps that is why so many stories drag on without ever changing chapters, because we confuse endurance with love and tolerance with surrender. But the truth is that true love does not ask us to erase ourselves so that the other can shine. It asks that both remain standing even when the wind is strong. The invisible echo of words that were never said. Silence has a weight of its own. It is not just the absence of sound, but the dense presence of everything that could have been said and was not. It settles between two people, like a thin but resistant veil, capable of distorting the view from one side to the other. At first it seems light, almost imperceptible, but over time it becomes a wall that no one knows how to cross anymore. There are relationships that do not end because of a fight or a scream, but because of this slow accumulation of unsaid things, a type of abandonment that happens while everyone remains in the same place. Nietzsche said that naming what everyone avoids is an act of courage, but courage in this case is not just speaking loud, it is speaking with truth. And that is an arduous task, because saying certain things can forever change the way the other sees us. It is simpler to swallow the words, to hide them in an internal drawer, like letters written and never sent. But what we forget is that even what is not said grows old. The paper yellows, the ink fades, and one day, even if you decide to speak, the same meaning is no longer there. Seneca would remind us that time is a commodity that cannot be accumulated, and yet we accumulate silences as if we had an eternity to break them. We hold on to resentments, confessions, apologies, until they become mere shadows of what they were. Silence, when prolonged, ceases to be protected and becomes poison. It is not a fast-acting poison, but one that seeps in little by little until it dissolves clarity and intimate. There is also the cruel paradox. We often remain silent to protect the other, but it is precisely this silence that pushes them away. Marcus Aurelius understood that honest communication is not just a gesture for the other, but a duty to oneself. When we omit what we feel, we cease to live with integrity. It is as if our own voice abandons us, and we are left watching our life unfold as if it belongs to someone else. The invisible echo of unsaid words is treacherous because it does not disappear. It spreads through the body, manifests in gestures, in glances, in distances we cannot explain. And when we finally realize it, it is no longer just what was left unsaid that weighs on us. It is the time lost believing there would be a perfect moment. There isn't. There is only the present moment, and it is always more fragile than it seems. When clarity arrives, there is no unseeing. There is a moment when everything clicked. There is no prior warning, no preparation. It is as if someone suddenly turns on a light in a room where you have grown accustomed to the dark. At first, the brightness hurts your eyes, and the urge is to close them again. But it's too late. You have already seen, and once you have seen, there is no going back. This moment, though liberating, can also be cruel, because it not only shows what is, but reveals how much was ignored to keep the illusion alive. Marcus Aurelius said that you have power over your mind, not outside event. This phrase carries a silent key. When the illusion shatters, there is a temptation to return to the previous comfort, to rebuild the story with the same pieces, even if they are cracked. But accepting reality is not resigning oneself to suffering. It is starting from solid ground, even if that ground is cold and uneven. The truth is not the end of the road. It is just the real ground on which one can walk. There is a strength that is born from this clear gaze. The moment you realize that the pattern repeats, that the gestures, words, and silences have an old script, you begin to see the whole scene as if watching from the outside. And this distance is revealing. It does not mean the pain disappears, but that it becomes less confusing. Clarity turns the pain into an outline. You begin to understand where it begins and where it ends. And with that, you discover that you can walk through it. Nietzsche would know that clear vision is an act of rupture, because by truly seeing, you stop participating in the silent pact that keeps things as they are. This scares those who prefer the half-light, but it is also an invitation to a more honest life. There are those who choose to close their eyes again, and there are those who accept that, however much it hurt, the light is now part of the landscape, and once it is a part, the shadow will never be the same again. This is the moment when perception transforms into practice. It is not enough to know. One must live according to what has been seen, and for that, a simple but profound gesture is enough. At the end of each day, write down a single sentence that got stuck in your throat. Keeping this record is like leaving marks in the sand, so that even when the tide tries to erase them, you remember where you started walking. Because clarity, once achieved, may hide for a while, but it never disappears completely. What remains standing after the collapse? When everything falls apart, what remains is not what was at the top, but what remained rooted, firm in the ground. Seneca reminds us that true worth is not in how the world treats, but in how we maintain our integrity in the face of the storm. Life can take everything: recognition, affection, certainty, but it cannot take away what we have cultivated within ourselves, the silent strength of one who knows their own value. Marcus Aurelius, looking at the raging sea, knew that the truth, no matter how ignored, never ceases to exist. It is the tide that always returns, revealing what was hidden at the bottom. When the water recedes, shells, stones, and also the wreckage that did not deserve to return to the surface appear. These are the images that invite us to a choice: to collect what is useful for reconstruction, or to get lost in what is already gone. The tide of life is relentless. It washes away and destroys, but it also reveals and renews. The collapse, though painful, has its beauty, because it is in the ground that the deepest roots grow, those that do not move with the wind. Integrity is that root, invisible to those who watch from afar, but essential for those who remain firm on their own ground. The final invitation is in the silence that remains after the storm. In the moment when the sand settles and the tired body finds its rhythm of breathing, there is a space to decide. Which truths will you carry forward from now on? Which ones will you no longer let sink? This decision does not need a loud voice. It can be a whisper, a gesture, an internal choice that silent becomes your anchor, because in the end, what remains standing is not what never fell, but what learned to get up, even when the tide insists on trying to take everything away. Life does not promise calm, but it always offers the chance for a new beginning. And this new beginning starts now, with the courage to look within and choose the truth that you will no longer allow to sink. The silence that settles after an interrupted conversation carries a weight that few words could bear. It is as if a river of emotions has been dammed, and the still water begins to silently corrode the bank from within. This feeling of something left unsaid is an echo that resonates in the chest, an insistence that does not cease, a reminder that what was not confronted still lives among us. This absence of true dialogue is a veiled invitation to introspection, a call to look within with the same courage with which we would look at the world outside. The challenge is not in changing the other, but in accepting what is, even if it means living with the pain of perception. For it is in acceptance that the power to transform anguish into learning and confusion into clarity resides. Seneca teaches us that life is not short, but that many of us waste time with distractions that take us away from what truly matters. Ignoring uncomfortable truths does not make them disappear. On the contrary, it creates a shadow that casts itself long and dark over our day, obscuring what could be light. Marcus Aurelius, in his practical wisdom, reinforces that one must look at reality without fear, like a warrior who faces battle knowing that resistance is as important as victory. The truth, however harsh, is an instrument of liberation, not a prison sentence. Like a dusty mirror in the corner of a room, the truth is always there, waiting to be revealed. But the dust of indifference, of fear, of complacency insists on remaining, creating a barrier between what we are and what we could be. Nietzsche pointed to this dust as an obstacle that everyone pretends not to see, but that few have the courage to face. In this moment, as we listen to the sound of silence that fills the space between unsaid words, we are invited to a choice: to continue avoiding cleaning the mirror or to finally face the reflection it offers. Because in the end, it is in this deep look within that the beginning of all true transformation lies. The desire to understand the other often arises from a sincere hope for connection, but it can turn into a dangerous path where one's own identity is diluted in the name of coexistence. There's a fine line between the search for understanding and the lost self, as if the mirror in which we see ourselves were replaced by a frosted glass that distorts the image we have of ourselves. Understanding should not be confused with tolerating what hurt, nor accepting what wears us down. Seneca teaches us that dignity is an inviolable limit, a ground that we must protect with the same firmness with which we guard our own life. It is possible to listen to the other without losing one's own center, and this is not weakness, the deepest form of self-care. However, the silent mistake lies in believing that infinite patience is a virtue when, in fact, it can be a form of painful silence that legitimizes what should not be allowed. The patience that becomes an excuse, the tolerance that turns into a crutch, create a cycle that repeats silently, corroding the soul until there is no strength left to fight. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, reminds us that we are made to resist, to remain standing, even when the world seems to want to knock us down. Life does not ask us to be fragile in the name of peace, but to find serenity in firmness, in the self-respect that is not negotiable. This mistaken understanding can be a silent trap, because it dresses itself in good intentions and hides under sweet words, but deep down, it is an invitation to accept less than we deserve, to erase parts of ourselves in the name of the other. Nietzsche would see in this a surrender that is not love, but fear of facing the emptiness that remains when we move away from what destroys us, even knowing that this distance is the first step toward true freedom.